Morning, everybody, and welcome into our next roundtable. And today we're going to be talking about gas prices and maybe the attitudes around them there as well. We've got two gentlemen here that have had the pulse, or had their fingers on the pulse of this issue for quite some time. Of course, we're talking about John Kingston, our editor-at-large in New York City, and then we've also got John Gallagher, our Washington correspondent in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here. As you have it, John Kingston, you had a chance to look at the EIA numbers, which came out earlier this week. A lot of positives, but maybe not one so much. Of course, those PADD 1 numbers dropping, that was a bit of a surprise. What was your take from that?
Yeah, that was a number that I think surprised a lot of people. I know I spoke to some oil analysts, and they did not expect to see that drop. So the Energy Information Administration comes out every Wednesday with a statistical report. Next week it'll be Thursday because of the holiday. Just want to mention that. It's not the greatest. It's a report that everybody watches. There are clearly flaws in it, but it's the best thing that's out there. So they break down some of the inventories into PADDs, and the country is divided up into 5 PADDs, and they're regional in base and regional in nature. And PADD 1 is the East Coast. So ultra low sulfur diesel inventories in PADD 1, really since the start of the year, have been dropping by really a precipitous amount, almost more than 50% from top to bottom. And that's one of the things that has sent East Coast diesel prices soaring relative to the rest of the country. You know, the EIA comes out with its weekly price that's used for fuel surcharges. They also come out with regional prices. The East Coast prices tended to be, pretty much right around where the national average is, maybe a little higher sometimes, a couple times lower. It got up to more than 30 cents above. That's just crazy. And inventories on the East Coast are the reason. So they dropped down to 19 point something 2 weeks ago. And then last week, they rose to 20 million plus barrels. And that's still a very low number. But the feeling out there was, okay, maybe we've turned the corner. The exports to Europe don't work mathematically anymore. The price there is not good enough to attract it. So, okay, maybe we hit bottom. Then it turns around this past week, announced 2 days ago, and it's back down again. It's back down to 19 million barrels today plus. So that kind of caught everybody by surprise. At the same time, for me, the number that matters the most, because it's the freshest, is what is the value of diesel on the East Coast, not at the retail level, but in the spot market level, relative to the price in the Gulf Coast. And we've been getting some great information every day from a benchmark gateway called General Index. Thank you very much, General Index. And that number got as high as like 70 plus. I mean, again, this is a number that usually the East Coast might be a few cents higher than the Gulf Coast. It got up to 70 cents plus just about a week ago, week and a half ago. This is just crazy. And it had been about 60 cents earlier in the month. It has now dropped about 4 days in a row. And as of yesterday, I believe it was 14 cents. So the inventory numbers to me are important. They're certainly ones you want to look at, but the market doesn't lie. That number in there, that East Coast market number, is a result of decisions being made by hundreds of buyers and sellers. And to me, the fact that it's come down is significant. Remember, 2-3 weeks ago, we had a fairly significant refining executive named John Catsimatidis, who owns a small refinery in Pennsylvania, but markets fuel on the East Coast, saying, you know what, things are so bad that I can imagine us going to allocations in the summer. That still may be, and allocations are like the most extreme thing you have to do when there's a true shortage. I'm comforted, putting aside the EIA stats, I'm comforted by the drop in the East Coast to Gulf Coast spread. We'll see what happens today. Then we'll take a 3-day break on it. But the past few days have given me some relief or some suggestion that possibly we're going to avoid the worst. The price is still high, and the price of diesel is always going to be affected mostly by the price of crude. But if you're really worried about allocations and shortages and freight not being able to move, to me, the East Coast to Gulf Coast number is the most important. And I'm comforted by what's happened over the past few days.
John Gallagher, you've been in Washington looking at some fuel price transparency bills. Can you fill us in on what you've kind of been hearing and seeing?
Yeah, so there have been 2 bills introduced, one in the House, one in the Senate. And both of them are geared toward giving the Federal Trade Commission more broader powers over transportation fuel. But the Senate bill is maybe more concerning for the companies that we watch, because it actually kind of calls out, the way I read it also calls out kind of the carriers as well. So just as an example, the House bill, the summary of the House bill reads, to protect consumers from price gouging price gouging of consumer fuels and for other purposes. But the Senate bill, it goes a step further. It says to ensure transparent and competitive transportation fuel markets in order to protect consumers from unwarranted price increases. So the Senate bill, it actually directs the EIA, like the agency John was just talking about, which is part of the Department of Energy, to collect and analyze and then publish more detailed information related to the quantity and pricing of transportation fuels to ensure fair competition. And this data would be used to help the FTC police, it says, the transportation fuel market. So, and if you read the language of the bill, it says it would collect information from energy companies. Now, when you read how they define energy companies for the purposes of the legislation, it says it includes a person, corporation, association, partnership engaged in transportation by any means of commercial amounts of crude oil or transportation fuel. So the way I read that is that this information collection and policing by the FTC could extend into trucking and rail, and maybe potentially affecting transportation rates. It's sort of ambiguous there. The Senate bill also doubles the penalties for manipulating the markets from $1 million to $2 million a day for every violation. So the recent thing that happened, so the House bill actually passed a couple of weeks ago, and it was all on a partisan vote. In fact, there were 4 Democrats that voted against it. So that just shows you really how partisan this bill is and the chances of it going through. In the Senate bill, they had a markup this week in the Commerce Committee. The Republicans tried to attach a bunch of amendments to it that would basically improve domestic production of oil and gas, fossil fuels. But Senator Cantwell, who heads up the Commerce Committee, she was basically having none of it, because basically saying these are not germane to the bill, because that deals with the Department of Energy and production. So so the bill passed. It still passed on a 14-14 strict party line vote. It passed through the committee. It was approved by the committee. So it still goes to the Senate floor, but. Again, the chances of this bill passing, Senator Wicker, the ranking member on that committee, he basically said the chances of the bill passing by the end of the year are remote. Senator Lee from Utah said, this is basically a price control bill. It gives the way more powers to the federal government. Definitions are ambiguous. So that might be the reason. The reason these are sort of under the radar might be because they're just so. It's so party line and partisan that the chances of them actually making it into law might be pretty remote.
John Kingston, let me turn back to you a little bit. It seems like there's just been a lot of talk about this kind of issue and the fact that maybe we're a little bit numb to it. We kind of heard high gas prices over and over and over again. Just talking to the people in your circles, have you heard any ideas about solutions or what the attitudes are about where gas prices and crude oil prices are right now?
Well, the solution is always what it is, which is a solution to high prices is high prices, and it's painful to say that. And I appreciate John and his very dry, analytical, perfectly logical discussion of what went on in Washington. Even if this legislation passed, it's not going to make any difference at all. Let's point out here. Let's talk about, for example, moves to cut gas taxes or diesel taxes. Markets have to balance. They will always seek to balance one way or the other. In a normal time, they balance pretty much on their own without any terrible disruption. In times like these, they're going to balance really through the price mechanism. The price is going to get really, really high, and it's going to destroy demand. Demand destruction is a real economic thing. When you cut, let's say, the gasoline tax, when you cut the diesel tax, you do get a temporary tax break. But you can also spur demand. That demand destruction doesn't go on. The market will then find a way to move to that demand destruction to balance the market. So I understand the political attractiveness of if you're a state legislator or voting to cut a gasoline tax or a diesel tax. I get that, but it is ultimately not going to change anything. It does not change the supply-demand balance. In fact, it makes it worse because it probably gooses the demand side a little bit. So, we've been through this before. This one is pretty painful because we've lost a significant amount of supply out of Russia. I will say, without getting political on this, that there have been numerous news stories that the Russians are finding a way to get their oil to market. The kind of baseline number of the amount of lost Russian supply has been about 3 million barrels a day. That's what the International Energy Agency projected would be lost from formal sanctions and informal sanctions. The latest news reports seem to be, nobody's putting a number on it, but oil seems to be getting out. And you want to know something? Oil always does seem to find a way out.
John, let me catch you up just a second right there. Give John Gallagher a chance. We've got about 45 seconds left. John, I'm living in one of those states that has repealed that gas tax, Georgia. Are you hearing anything else politically in, say, 30 seconds up on the Capitol Hill of just more action towards lowering gas prices?
On Capitol Hill, no, but I know it's going on a lot in the states. Obviously, I talked briefly to the and the potential for that. I mean, that's leaking into the markets too, because I talked just really briefly to a guy. He's the operations guy at a company called Petroleum Marketing Group. They're basically a big wholesaler of diesel and gasoline. And when I was asking him about these bills, he said his biggest concern were these what was going on in the different states in terms of the gas tax holidays and such. So just to give a brief kind of on the ground feel from the guys that actually deal with this, that's a huge concern from them. But from a federal level, no, it's more about these price gouging bills.
Well, gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. This is going to be obviously a very interesting subject from here on out as we look at it. Thanks for joining us for this discussion. We look forward to any other details, of course, as this situation continues to change over time, of course, into the high driving summer season. We'll take a short break and come back after this and wrap up the rest of FreightWaves Now.